list of things that you should not ever say to grieving parents. Do not pass go, do not collect $200, and do not ever say to a parent who has lost their child, I know what you're feeling because I lost my cat, or I lost my dog, I lost my pet who was like a child to me. I lost my spouse, I lost my parent. I'm not going to compare tragedy. I'm not going to compare the trauma of death or loss. I am going to say that there are some factors which make the loss of a child even more shocking, regardless of the circumstances. So to say that you know what one is going through, unless you have actually lost a child, and even then, you don't know the background of that loss. It's best to just tell the truth, which is, I can't imagine what you're going through. I can't imagine how difficult this is for you. Say that, and say that you're praying for the person. That brings me to point number 2. Do not try to explain why this person has lost a child. That has to be one of the most prideful, presumptuous, ignorant stances that we take. Even if by some miraculous revelation you have some kind of insight as to why this person's child has passed, unless no, I take it back. God's not going to tell you to share that. You know why? Because the person doesn't care. When your child dies, you don't care why. I've had people tell me, oh, your anointing will be that much stronger. I didn't want to be anointed. I wanted my child to be alive. I've had people tell me that you'll be more compassionate. You'll be able to really understand others. I could have understood you a different way with my child still alive. So there is no reason. And that brings me to the third point. There is no reason. You don't know the reason. Sometimes I think people have great difficulty sitting in silence with grieving parents because you don't want to imagine yourself in their shoes. When someone loses a spouse, you can go home if you're married and think about your spouse and say, gee, if anything ever happened to my husband or my wife, man, I really would be phased if anything ever happened to my mom or my dad. But no one really wants to sit and imagine the loss of their child. It's not a reality that parents want to face. It's not something that they're comfortable with. And so in that discomfort, people try to come up with something to say, and it's best to just say nothing. If you're going to visit a grieving parent, then regardless of how long it's been after the death, don't try to fill the space with words, because saying the wrong thing is more devastating than not saying anything at all. Parents can deal with silence. When you lose a child, your house becomes quiet, your heart becomes quiet, your life seems quiet. And so we're not strangers to silence. It's the ignorant comments that we cannot take. So when you don't know what to say, just simply say that I don't know what to say, but I'm going to sit with you, and I can be here with you. I can listen to you. If you want to say something, I can give you a hug. I can pat you on the back. I can make you a cup of tea, or I can get you some coffee, but I'm just going to be here for you however I can be. That's the best thing that you can say or do. Point number 4. Please do not create a timetable for grieving parents. I had someone tell me once that it had been 2 years and I needed to move on. And I was stunned and dumbfounded and shocked because it had been 2 years since my son died suddenly, and I was still in shock. I was just beginning to acknowledge the fact that he had passed. The shock was just wearing off. And so I was astounded that this person would tell me, that I needed to be over it. I shouldn't be so emotional and crying and having the difficulty that I was having around uh, Christmas holiday and Mother's Day, and it's just ridiculous. There is no timetable um, to grief. Grief happens in cycles. The loss of a child um, comes back again and again and again. You will deal with it when your friends have children or grandchildren. You deal with it at this time of year, at Christmas, where the television ads and the malls and even the conversation. If you talk with your friends or your relatives or coworkers, most likely people are talking about gifts that they're trying to get for their child or their grandchild, and even those subtle conversations, overhearing them can be a trigger. So don't put someone on a timetable. And as a side note, this is not point number 5. I guess I would make it 4B. Be mindful when you're speaking with grieving parents not to complain about the running around you have to do for your own children or grandchildren for the holidays, because they may listen, they may be quiet, but that's very painful. To listen to a parent or a grandparent complain about how much money they're spending, how many stores they have to go to get a toy for this child because they really, really want it. The only thing that goes through a grieving parent's mind is, I wish my child was here for me to stand in line for 5 hours to get that game or to get that special edition toy. So just be mindful. That's a conversation you can have with other friends or other persons, but it's one that should be reserved from a grieving parent. Point number 5, be mindful that this person, these couples have lost a child. Their tradition may have changed. They may not want to do the things that they did when their child was alive. It may be difficult for them to join a gathering where everyone's kids are going to be running around, and you need to be sensitive to that. Don't isolate couples. Don't isolate grieving parents and say, well, she didn't want to come, so she could have come if she wanted to. No, for a moment, just imagine and put yourself in his or her, in their shoes. If you had lost a child at any point in time, would you really want to be able to be surrounded by children running around? It can be very overwhelming and very difficult. So if at all possible, try to check in. Just be mindful that your friends, your relatives, your coworkers, they are having a difficult time, and as much as you can, try to be sensitive to that. You don't necessarily have to walk on eggshells, but just be mindful. Oh, I remember this time of year could be difficult, and just tell them, I'm praying for you. I'm thinking about you. I'm here if you need me.